Hola, hola, que me acabé el otro juego. Que estoy jugando este que no sé cómo se llama. Mira, taca, taca, taca. Ah, es que este está. Ah, ah, ah. Hija. Estoy jugando con Julius Belmont, ¿verdad? Toma, perra, toma. What the fuck is this shit? Mamá. Bueno, ya me voy. No, perdóname, perdóname.
strong and drifting line as they departed a nearby town in the mountains. One of the locals urged the hikers to be careful, as wildlife in the area was beginning to change. Things like one, but even obstacles with driving animals and snake vehicles countries. Bears and three, and then witness blowing themselves on the trains. The hostilities group survived the trial. The Lima busily heading out the rest of students. Sasha, Dennis, Victoria, Tatiana, Valentina, Carol, all ready to go. Who's fun and fun ways. Following around, guys are summoning. Rock backs. The group is walking uphill at a steady pace, among the trees, to the mountains. So far, the weather is favorable, only some few months relieved the weather forecast remains increased, as there are some experienced hikers. Aware that her group must keep up their strength, insists that they eat 4 times a day, including snacks during rest stops. She knows that some people think of her as hardened, a survivalist drill sergeant for her students, pushing them to their limits. But in her own mind, the safety of her hikers is always her first concern. They're making good time, guarding the summit first range ahead of schedule. Even the least experienced hikers, the 24-year-old Tatiana and the 16-year-old Victoria, managed to keep up. For both of them, it's their first grade 3 hike, a major milestone that will be inspired beyond the year. But after the summit group is part of time, they have a lot of charming awaits them in the coming days. Something else awaits them, something they can't possibly know about. They're miles from any remaining civilization. The winds and weather forecasts are on the bottom are shifting. It's clear. It's full. 2 days This early confidence starts to wane. The group reaches a tremendous alpine zone, and here the fortune is turned. The weather sours. Heavy rain, wind, whips and tears of the 7 hikers. Visibility is poor. The temperature is dropping rapidly. Their progress slows to a crawl. Even Mila clutches onto her mount like a lifeline, making sure that they stay on the proper path. One of the worst things that can happen in these conditions is to stray off course and get lost. Mila knows her students will make the range before nightfall begins. She barks orders through the raging wind, instructing the group using a camp. The students sprang into action and began setting up their tents in an open, flat area about 2 miles above the tree line. It's exposed, but Mila reasons that they had better play it safe and not push themselves. She urges her students to forage before it gets too dark. Keeping their strength up is important. There's no telling how long they're going to need to wait out the storm. The group manages to find deposits of gold food in the area, and they hurriedly gather as much as they can. It's rich in minerals and nutrients. Supplements to their cash supplies. Once camp is set up, they cluster into 2 tents for the night. One for the boys, one for the girls. Hunkers down with Tatiana, Victoria, and Valentina, trying her best to stay warm. Outside, the temperature plummets. The rain rises heavily. Even knows her best not to show it, but she's concerned. This isn't what they were supposed to be in the nose. It's too exposed. Also, for days, she's been growing increasingly concerned that her map of the area is inaccurate. At the summit, noticed Typhoon's field. There would be a sturdy structure and firewood waiting for them, but Lady Mila can't tell how close they are to it. She decides that it isn't worth the gamble to try to reach a wooden structure that may or may not actually be where her map of plankton is. As of now, the students were shivering, like otherwise students. The youth concern is growing. The storm goes on for much longer. Things can turn sour very, very quickly. But even still, she puts on a brave face for her students. She's been on worse heights than this. They all. It's her confidence and experience that gives courage to the least experienced hiker. That's all for shot. One, far below, Constantine's Valley Room is having a particularly pleasant time. At their lower elevation, there's no wind or snow. They all get a restful night's sleep, relative comfort. On August 5th, they arrived at Lake Paddlewater, right on schedule. The small lake is the agreed-upon rendezvous point for Constantine's Valley Room. The summit are to back up. But there was no sign of the summit Constantine rise. So he tells the students to unshoulder their pants, relax a while, and enjoy. One of the members of this party is Natalia Colombian, 16-year-old daughter. She takes off her backpack and helps the others set up their tents. She isn't concerned about her mother's tardiness. She understands better than me that he is a cautious person. Plus, the Southern Union has several inexperienced teenagers. She want to make sure her group is safe before. When they're finished setting up the tents, she starts to wander along the shore, looking up in the long and long mountains. From the lake, she doesn't have a direct view of where her mother would be. She notices something strange among the trees in the distance. They want to see the bright, but at an angle, like things by an enormous mountain. Combined with some scattered clouds around the peaks, she assumes that means there are pockets of bad weather at the high altitude. And her students might be getting some rain and wind. She's concerned, but nothing she hasn't been before. Suddenly, however, the tunnel stops and turns. A set of eyes are staring out her from the foliage nearby, unblinking. It's loose. Natalia's mouth falls open. She wants to call the other hikers, but she doesn't. Nurses always steer clear of hikers, but for some reason, this one isn't intimidated by their presence at all. In fact, there's an almost aggressive air to its posture. It's unsettling to encounter. That's when she remembers what the people in town told her about the bears in the area. Something isn't right. Animals and humans. Slowly, she backs away. The loose, cold spins its round. Natalia returns to her room and tries to move silent lines. She reminds herself that animals sometimes behave strangely, just like human beings. She'll have to remember to tell her mother about this. A day passes. Then another. The moon begins to show us concern with the sunset. There's a chance that the sun isn't like the mountain at all. The way they hiked in. Or perhaps they hustled down to the rendezvous point early, hinting dawn before the valley moon arrived. But then again, who knows? The uncertainty of it all weighs heavily on them, especially Natalia. On the second night, she dreams about her mother. In this dream, Eva speaks directly to her, telling her that she can't get off the mountain. Natalia wakes up shocked and has difficulty sleeping the rest of the night. Thoughts and fears about her mother's safety keep her awake. She tries to tell herself that she's just being silly, that her mother's group is so late simply because Eva is being cautious about the weather. But after 48 hours, this seems way more than at breakfast, she tells Constantine about her parent. She pleads with him to go back up the mountain and search. It's a great free hike after all. They don't need special gear. Constantine is sympathetic to her concerns, but reminds her that they don't have enough supplies for their whole amount of food, but they're the hikers at best. It's reassuring, firm, but the leader so she accepts his reasoning. There's new hikers, sure, but they're not professional search and rescue team. Soon after, they reach their final destination, a small town with streams of ponds like Buckout. But a cloud hangs over their arrival, because there's no sign of a meaningless group here either. Natalia is beside herself now. They came together. The two were supposed to be together. He even has train tickets for the whole group. Natalia doesn't know what to do. She's always looked up to her mother for strength, confidence, uncertain danger, as Yoda's solution. Constantine's eyes return to the high peaks in the distance. It's to hear that he's made a terrible decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life. What on earth, he wonders, is happening up the mountain? The nights of August 12th. All the people understands on getting sleep. Morning hours. One of the students from the boys' tent trudges over to the women's tent. It's such an experienced 20-year-old lady. He's like a surrogate son to the baby. He tells her that the boys are uncomfortable and calls are too much to bear. At this elevation, there's no tree cover, no protection from the storm. Their tents are no match for the relentless wind. At 4 in the morning, the tethers snap. Everyone scrambles out, and the colts are struggling to secure their shelters. Snow seeps into tents, soaking in sleeping bags. It's miserable, punishing nights. Finally, at dawn, you want to tell them it's time to go. They must descend. After a quick breakfast of canned stew, the group begins hiking back down the mountain to the south. While they're still roughly following their planned routes, they've abandoned any attempt to summon the game, and instead seek protection from the severe weather 2.5 miles below where the tree cover. The heavy winds continue, making it difficult to progress. Visibility is distant. Suddenly, the knob heading out, Sasha falls down. The other hikers help him to his feet, but soon he collapses again. He's starting to fall behind. You hangs back to help him, telling the other hikers to go ahead. She and Sasha will catch up. The 5 other students comply, grabbing onto each other and stabilize themselves against the wind. Like the phalanx of Roman soldiers, they make their way slowly and deliberately down the mountain. They're making progress, and the tree line is beginning to feel achievable. But soon, they hear Nina's voice shouting from behind them. She's screaming for help. Leaving the phalanx, 17-year-old Valentina rushes back to help their leader. She arrives to find Lina crouched by Sasha's body, despondent. The young man who had been completely cold a few hours before is leaving. Valentina is closer. She sees that his eyes are vacant, staring off into the distance. Sasha is dead. Overcome with shock, Valentina is momentarily unable to speak or breathe. It feels like she's stuck into a nightmare. The nightmare is not beginning, because a moment later, Mila collapses as well. The other students see her go down, and pain sweeps through the group like a wildfire. The phalanx breaks. Valentina looks on in terror as chaos breaks out. Everyone is screaming, flailing, but not because they're afraid. They're all in pain. Valentina's fellow students are bleeding from their ears, eyes, and noses. They're foaming in the mouth. This doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. The people are tearing at their lungs frantically and madly. Valentina has never seen anything like it. And suddenly, 2 per shot, 4 of them begin to collapse to the ground, one by one. Valentina tries to hold Victoria to her feet, to rapidly finds Valentina's hands. She tries again, as he brought down the mountain. They're only able to make it a few more steps before Victoria finds her again. She doesn't go far. She falls to the ground and stops. Valentina keeps going. Maybe if she makes it to a nearby cluster of rocks, then she will sing from this madness. But when she nears the rocks, she halts, stopping her tracks by yet another terrifying sight. One of the other girls, Tatiana, is already in the rocks and is bashing her own head against them. And over again. A clip of blood scares her face from view. Tatiana keeps smashing her head into these rocks until eventually she stops. Valentina is frozen, paralyzed, in shock. This may be minutes. Zero warning. Her intent has struck dead. Suddenly, Naeem shouts Valentina, shaking her out of her stupor. Someone is still alive. While the voice, minutes, is on his hands and knees, waiting for the ears of mouth. Yet he's able to muster up enough energy to get from once. Run. This shocks Valentina into action. She bolts downhill, making for the tree line. Behind her, Dennis tries to crawl after him, but he has no strength. She glances over her shoulder to make sure he's following. He isn't. His lying face flies in the snow. Find out it's just Valentina. Overcome with fear, the burning desire to survive. She advances downhill, the swirling planet, flying in snow, stumbling, crawling, until at last, she finally reaches the tree line, the shelter from the wind. She gets a sleeping bag out of her backpack and crawls inside. She huddles into a ball of warmth before she passes out. A day later, the weather subsides. Valentina wakes up on August 6th. It's Hawaii's. Screams. No compliment. Just the gentle rustling of trees. Of the melting snow. She cautiously emerges from her sleeping bag. That sounds. She slept for almost 24 hours. She doesn't get rested. The horrific sights from the day before are clear in her mind's eye. She wishes that she could dismiss it as a nightmare, something caused by a lack of sleep and exhaustion. She knows the truth. She can't get herself. She is alone. Valentina slowly starts to plunge into the
Chingados, cabrón.
She's gotta see her fellow hikers. She needs to have some sense of what happens. The bodies found outside. A cluster of 4 of them lie the rocks into the farther of this level. And all still in silence. Stealing herself, Valentina walks from body to body. She can't do anything except look in her eyes. She passes Tatiana, the 24-year-old secretary, the one who smashed her face into the rocks not long ago. She passes the small body of Timo. He's only 15 years old. He's the youngest. Victoria was also there. Valentina couldn't help but feel some kinship. Here, she had been so eager to hide it, and she had her parents persuade her to leave to let her join them, even though she was an inexperienced hiker. It breaks her heart to see Dennis, the boy who saved her, lying in the slum. He hadn't told her to run. She might have died there as well. Once she's closed all their eyes, Valentina does her best to cover the bodies with one of the tents. She gathers whatever supplies she can from their packs. Food, the map, the compass. But as it turns out, the map and compass are no use because Valentina is lost. The The snowdrifts make it impossible to follow the path that would be planned for them. They were less than halfway through the 40-kilometer route. Valentina doesn't want to risk hiking over the snowy field alone. Instead, she decides to head back down in the general direction her route done. She needs to get to a more reasonable altitude as soon as possible. As she continues her descent, a promising sight meets her eyes. Cables running above the treetops, power lines which run to the nearby peak mountain. Her choice, she continues walking. Her line of power lines, trusting that they'll show her a way to safety. After all, when there's power, there's bound to be civilization. It's entirely needs unchanged her. Her supplies were then fast. She eats a dry gold fruit, foraged by the group several days before. It's rich in minerals, keeps her going. Her home is impossibly far away in these desolate mountains, yet one thought pushes Valentina forward. The thought of her home back in Kazakhstan, the thought of her family, the trusted people to bring the little value home safely. Valentina has to survive to see them again. She travels from tower to tower, possibly catch her breath, but never stopping. She treks for 4 days, growing delirious. It's one fortunate night she finds a winter hut unlocked. She collapses inside, grateful for the shelter. But she's on her feet the next day, determined not to die alone in the mountains. She doesn't notice when she catches a cold, but she can feel a fever eating away at her. Has to pause every so often to allow herself to cough. At lower altitude, there's less snow, but aside from the cabin, she hasn't seen any civilization, not a town, not even an outpost. Because of this, now it's immediately eaten away at her. Perhaps she should have tried to retrace Ruby's footsteps instead, back to the town they started out from. Finally, Valentina reaches a river. This gives her some hope. Many of the rivers in the area flow from the mud town. She's working hard to trip. She follows the rocky shore, heading upstream in hopes that someone will see her. But eventually, by the grace of God, someone does. On August 9, 1993, tourists from Ukraine crossed the valley. Tourists, Alexei Vivitsky, sees her and swims to her side. Valentina has done the impossible. She survived. She's rescued. She is incoherent. Is only able to give local police scattered accounts of what happened. Nevertheless, while Valentina is her family, a search efforts mounted to find the bodies of her companions. And one rescue response defines explanation, even to this day. August 24th, 1993. Helicopters fly over the peak of the Kamar-Daban mountain range. They've been searching for weeks, trying to locate the missing group of hikers from Kazakhstan. Finally, someone sees something, and the helicopters descend. They found the summit group's final campsites. With this, the bodies. The snow around the peak has melted, revealing the gruesome sight. After 19 days of exposure to the elements, their bodies are conditioned. The tin that Valentina draped over them couldn't prevent them from rotting. None of the bodies have eyes. One is why they're linked in science. With increased visibility on the mountain, rescuers were able to see that the hikers died only a few hundred feet shores of its peak. A woody tower is deep there, which would have protected them against the elements far better than a pleasant tent on the summit of the mountain. Likely, Eva hadn't fought to get there safely, puzzles the search party, even as they gathered unfortunate victims. More puzzling is the fact that they find this can of stew by the campsites. Nothing else, no other food, not even a candy bar member. It's this evidence that seems to indicate that this room was underfed and needlessly exposed to the elements. They zip up the bodies in bags and load them onto the helicopter. The smell is unbearable as they take them back to the autopsy. The bodies are found to be protein deficient and malnourished. The leader of the search party, Yuri Goliath, has the camps to the hazardous placement of their campsites. To him, it's no mystery what happened in these camps in the mountain, and he knows exactly what he herself. Yuri is familiar with Lee, and is long believed that she mistreated her students. Based on his previous encounters with her, Yuri claims that she often pushed her teenage students to their limits, underfeeding them and not providing them with proper clothing for the elements. Harry's mind, there's no doubt that Lee-Yu's poor leadership contributed to the deaths of the divine. Even further, he claimed that he would have put it past Lee to choose a poor campsite in order to, quote, tell them her students up. But even still, not everyone agrees with Yuri's assertion. Valentina, after years of silence in the wake of this horrific event, spoke out in support of Lee and Corvina. She claims that the spring was well fed and cared for throughout the hike, and that Lee knew that they were hikers of varying experience, so she planned for a diet of 2,400 calories a day. The official cause of death for the 5 students is listed as hypothermia. As for Lee herself, it's believed that she died of a heart attack upon seeing Sasha dying before her eyes. But the details of the event itself defy such an easy conclusion. For instance, why was Valentina able to survive if all of them were in the same state of malnutrition and exposure? How was she, a 17-year-old girl, able to outlast and experience Valentina in her own years? Most of all, why did their deaths happen so suddenly, in such close proximity? Satisfactory answers, unfortunately, remain elusive. However, as it stands, the facts are these. 6 healthy individuals died very suddenly, in close proximity to each other. All of them displayed strange, unexplained symptoms in their final moments that included self-harm, leading from the ears, eyes, or throat, in sudden, debilitating pain. All of these details come from Valentina herself, who describes the experience. Now, hypothermia could explain some of the symptoms Valentina noticed, such as the attempts to frantically disrobe. This is a phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing. In extreme cold weather, a person's blood vessels constrict to say that. As hypothermia sets in, the constriction of these blood vessels fails, causing warm blood to flood back to the extremities, making someone feel like they're overheating, even as they literally freeze to death. People in this state frequently tear off items of clothing, only using their own lives. But smashing your own head, rocks, sudden, inexplicable bleeding, either of these are symptoms of hypothermia, nor should they be contagious in the way that they seem to be among people in this group. Another theory is that these hikers suffer from altitude sickness, which can trigger any number of adverse effects in the human body. Among these can be pulmonary edema, a buildup of fluid in the lungs, which can trigger heart palpitations and blood coughing. Perhaps it could have been something they came to drink. The strange behavior that Valentina witnessed could have been caused by a poisonous plant that others had consumed, which she fortunately avoided. Or perhaps containing water as the culprit. Lake Baikal is known for high levels of contamination, and if hikers fill their water bottles from one of its rivers, they can really poison themselves without even knowing it. In the pursuit of truth, curious researchers have turned away from the direct events of the hike towards increasingly elaborate conspiracy theories. The most dramatic of these is that these hikers were unwitting participants in a Russian puppets test. Victims of some nerve agent that got unleashed under the cover of the storm. Novichok chemicals, for instance, were developed in the late stages of the Cold War by the Soviet Union. Phosphorus-based and designed to be undetectable, they caused disorientation, as well as foaming the mouth, in Mr. Harrison form. A similar, if slightly outlandish theory assumes that the sudden hysteria of death among the group was caused by infrasound. The term infrasounds refers to low-level frequencies that can occur naturally, emitted by geophysical phenomena. These sounds, while not audible to the human ear, can be felt by the cochlear medium ear, causing extreme discomfort. In certain extreme conditions, infrasound has been known to cause sudden sickness, death. At certain frequencies, it's theorized that these sounds can cause the internal organs of someone to vibrate, causing internal damage. But even still, what could have caused these sounds? Why would they have affected only 6 of the 7 fingers? Every single theory inevitably runs up against the central question of this entire incident. How will Valentina survive? Prince asks her how she managed to live when the others didn't. Her answer is she was in very good physical condition. She lived on a farm her whole life and was used to high altitude and strenuous exercise. But this description could apply to any one of the hikers present. Even the youngest member of the group, 15-year-old, was an experienced outdoorsman. The only hiker with questionable experience, the 16-year-old Victoria, had previously suffered from fatigue on these hikes. There just has to be something missing, some detail that got lost in the goings of Valentina's trauma, the punishing wonder. But if there is a key that helps us understand what happened at Command Devon, it's unfortunate to admit you're extremely lost. Like the dead, the mountain keeps its secrets. If there's one thing to take away from all this, their campsites, full memory, all history. Late Nights with Nexpo is created and hosted by me, Nexpo, executive produced by me, Mr. Ballin, Link Winters, and Zach Levitt. Our head of writing is Evan Allen. This episode was written by Robert Teamstra. Copy editing by Lou Baratz. Audio editing and sound design by Alistair Sherman. Mixed and mastered by Brendan Kane. Research by Abigail Shumway, Naomi Callahan, Evan Beaver, and Stacey Wood. Fact-checking by Abigail Shumway. Production supervision by Jared Bell and Cole Messi. Production coordination by Savannah Collins and Andrew Seaman. Illustrations by Rick Water. Animation by David Tang. Thank you all so much for listening to Late Nights with Nexpo. I love you all. And we are back. Thank you guys so much for listening to and watching the first episode of Late Nights with Nexpo. I give so much love and passion on this project. That being static, you guys will listen to shoot more next week on the channel. Again, nothing about this podcast in any capacity replaces anything we know about the podcast. All of to that point, we are just a couple weeks out from the next video. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all so much for watching. Follow Late Nights with Nexpo every week. There are 2 episodes out right now. I love you.
La ciampa perra, la ciampa perra. Che decide il tempo. Accidente! E poi c'è un po' di pedra. Che mi prezzo di tiro. Guarda, sta per tanti.